Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ, and we are on video number 9, picking up from section titled The Inner and Outer, where we talk about the meaning of sacraments, which derives from the prefix sa, meaning to satisfy, in the Indo-European understanding of that stem. So ultimately we're looking to satisfy our inner self, to find fullness. We can do this through the spiritual things, or we can do this through the flesh things. And it's our soul that is looking to bridge the gap between the two. So we can either cross to one side or the other through the flesh, or on the other side to the spiritual realm. But ultimately, Philip is reminding us it is in spiritual things that we find our fullness through gnosis and consuming truth and wisdom. And the flesh things are temporary things that do not provide us ultimate fullness, but rather creates division and a need to continually reincarnate, as it's ever an endless array of consuming that does not lead to fullness. And now we're going to go into the understanding of the full person, the male and the female. And Christ has talked about this in many ways, either it being that we find fullness through overcoming our division or integrating the different parts of ourselves, the male and the female part. So the division referring to the left and the right, good and evil. This is the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, which is the left and the right. So integrating these two in the whole ultimately brings us fullness. And the other way in which to do it is to integrate the left and the right, or the male and the female. We talked earlier about how Christ goes about and takes 72 cloth and throws them in a vat and mixes them up, and out comes the white cloth. And all the cloth are of various colors. Essentially, this was referring to back in the day that Christ walked the earth, there were essentially 72 Sanhedrin leaders, or 71, and then there was the master leader for a total of 72. That was to represent the 72 different ethnic groups. But Christ has come to say that there's no need for one group of or body of people to rule over humanity. For all of these ethnic groups, or these people, are the same. They are sons and daughters of God, and they are unique in their own way, and their truth is unique to them, and they all are pieces of the whole. This is the way we have to understand the pleroma, which is the fullness, the realm of plenty and fullness. So when Philip talks about the fall and return to fullness, this is what he's referring to. So let's pick up on that section. Before Christ, some came from a realm they could not re-enter, and we talked about this in the previous video, but here we're talking about those that could not enter into the pleroma without Christ coming here to bring us gnosis. And so then the Christ came, so those who went in he brought out, and those who went out he brought in. So meaning out of the pleroma and back to the fullness again. Next section, when Eve was in Adam. When Eve was in Adam, there was no death. When she was separated from him, death came. If she enters into him again and he embraces her, death will cease to be. So again, this is the spiritual understanding of the male and the female, bringing these together. This is the reason why we seek out romantic partners, is we're seeking out what we're lacking in ourselves, rather it be spiritually masculine or spiritually feminine. And this doesn't have to be through a heterosexual relationship, nor is it through a homosexual relationship, but rather it's through any relationship. But ultimately, we're doing this as a means to find fullness or wholeness, when in reality, it's not through those kinds of relationships that we find ultimate fullness. Now, we can get some wisdom through relationships and some gnosis through relationships, whether it be through suffering or it be through beauty or love. This can be done through a soulmate or a twin flame. But it is only through the Christ and Sophia that we can get the complete fullness. And this is what Philip is talking about when he talks about Eve was in Adam. That was the point at which Sophia was in the Adam. And then when the demiurge attempted to take Sophia out, to take back the gnosis, that's when Eve was formed or created. And that's when death came about. So this death occurred prior to Eve partaking the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This was already a result of wisdom and gnosis having been taken from Adam, and the whole person having been separated into the two flesh-oriented sexes. Next section, why have you forsaken me? Quote, my God, why, Lord, have you forsaken me? Unquote. He spoke these words on the cross, for he had left that place. Now here is an example of something we're taking from the canonical gospel texts, where Christ had questioned the Father about why have you forsaken me? Or have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? Philip is saying that it was the flesh Jesus that was left on the cross and the Christ Spirit that left the flesh Jesus. And that Jesus had gone into ignorance, and at that point no longer had gnosis and was not certain why he was on the cross and why God had left him there. This is the way we understand things in this realm. We understand in the Proto-Orthodox model that if we pray hard enough to God, then God will come and deliver us from whatever situation we're in. When Philip is suggesting that when we have arrived to the place in which we have accomplished our mission on earth, then the spirit leaves, and there's no need to save the flesh body. This is what Philip is ultimately saying when Christ talks about why have you forsaken me. This is a rhetorical question that the Jesus is asking, because ultimately Christ knows why he left the body of Jesus, and that is this body was no longer necessary, because Christ was to take on a true flesh, a different type of flesh, not the corrupt flesh, but the imperishable flesh that Philip talks about in the next section called true flesh. The Master was conceived from what is imperishable through God. The Master rose from the dead, but he did not come into being as he was. Rather, his body was completely perfect. It was of flesh, and this flesh was true flesh. Our flesh is not true flesh, but only an image of the true. So the current flesh that we have corrupts. It dies. Typically around the age of 15 to 17, it starts to deteriorate, and then it does so for the rest of your life, and then it perishes. But the Christ was the first to take on the imperishable body, following his death and ascension from the cross. He took on a different body, one that is able to walk through walls, is able to heal itself, is able to transfigure itself. And so all of us will take on this type of body. It will be a body that is made of light water. And in this world, we're made of a different substance. It's true we're about 70 to 80% water, but the remaining substance is made of earth matter. And in that realm, we'll take on light water, which is a different substance. And the flesh, as we understand it, will no longer be. The next section, the wedding chamber. Animals do not have a wedding chamber, nor do slaves or defiled women. The wedding chamber is for free men and virgins. Philip here is essentially telling you that in that realm there is no more lust and sexual intercourse. Men are free from their lust and urge of women, and women are free of intercourse with men. Therefore, they're virgin. Next section, baptism. We are born again through the Holy Spirit, and we are conceived from Christ in baptism with two elements. We are anointed through the Spirit, and when we were conceived, we were united. And the two elements here are water and fire, or light. In this case, it's light, the baptism. This is what's referred to in the New Testament of the canonical text as the baptism by fire and the baptism by water. These are the two elements. So we are born through the Holy Spirit, which is the Mother Father. The Father is the light, which is the will, and the Mother is the one that is the vessel that contains the light, and she represents the water. Those are the two elements. We are anointed through the Spirit, and we were conceived, not created, but conceived and emanated. We were united, meaning we had both light and water. Today we're missing the light, mainly the gnosis that's dormant in all of us is asleep. And as that gnosis grows, so the light grows, and our body transforms into the true flesh that Philip talked about earlier. And when Philip talks about the wedding chamber as well, he's talking about making your vows to the spiritual realm, to the Mother, Father, in the pleroma, and thereby you are eternally faithful to and married to, and you merge with the pleroma. That's that understanding the wedding chamber. And so it continues under the section baptism. No one can see oneself in the water or in a mirror without light, nor can you see yourself in the light without water or a mirror. And the mirror here is representing the image of God, or the image of the Christ, that reflects back to us in the light. So it is necessary to baptize with two elements, light and water. And light is chrism. And the light represents the anointing, the Christ that comes and wakes the gnosis in you. That's the moment of enacting the chrism, where the oil is placed on your forehead and your hand. And this is representing the hand is the will, much like you take the sword in the hand and you will whatever you're willing. And then the mind represents one's commitment and one's faithfulness and one's intention. So this is the forehead. And when the gnosis overtakes you, this is the chrism moment. The chrism is merely the sacrament, or it's the ritual that represents that moment that gnosis is in your mind. It awakens your mind. That's the knowledge in action. And then wisdom is the experience gained, which is the will in hand. That's the wisdom. So Sophia is the hand, and the Christ is the forehead or the head. And these two work together to get the mission done. Next section is the temple in Jerusalem. There were 3 structures for sacrifice in Jerusalem. And this also can be paralleled in astral theology to the 3 modalities. We have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And we're going to look at each of these. And recall we talked about sacrifice coming from that word sa, and that is to satisfy the flesh orientation. The sack, which is the container that holds, it's emptied out, it carries the burden and carries whatever the contents are. This is the sacrifice. And this is the flesh body that is being sacrificed because it contains the spiritual realm or the spiritual self, which is the Christ, kingdom of God within. And in the old days, prior to Christ's coming, there were sacrifices required at 3 different structures, and they were animal sacrifices. And again, that was to appease, to satisfy the gods, in this case, the Jehovah God, which is the face of the demiurge among the Hebrew people. That sacrifice was done in order to appease or to satisfy that God, that Jehovah God. And this, of course, is very common among all kinds of religions throughout earth, throughout history. You present some type of sacrifice or gift to the gods, and then they are pleased. And so too, in this case, among the Hebrew, their god was the planet Satan, or the planet of Saturn, which is Satan, essentially. And their special day was the day of Saturday, or Sabbath. And so they would sacrifice their animals to this planet, Saturn, the black planet. In astrotheology, we say that each of the planets and each of the signs have their own color. And Capricorn, which is the goat, which also symbolizes Pan, and the hermaphrodite, the Baphomet, all of these representing symbols or totems of the devil himself, or Satan himself. And Saturn, the planet Saturn, which is structures and limitations. It's the dark border of the coloring book. And then you color in, you just follow the lines, the dark lines. And even today, the judge that we get from the word, we get from Judah, judge, jury, Jerusalem, Jewish, all of those come from the Judeans. Our law is founded on that. That's why they wear black. They wear the black robes. When you graduate, you wear the black robes and the black hat. And the Jewish men wear the black box on their head and one on their hand. Again, that's the will in hand and the mind, which is one's intention, what one's focusing on, you see. And then the Muslim, who also follow the religion of Jehovah, go to Mecca and they do a circle around the black cube. And in Christianity, you have the priests in Catholicism, and they show up in their black suits with their little white collars. Those are the priests. And it's during the age of Pisces, and so they wear their hats. The exalted in an astrotheology of Saturn, or Capricorn, or the exalted planet, or sign, rather. Saturn is exalted in the sign of Pisces. And when we say in astrotheology, when we talk about exalted, we mean the highest sacred knowledge of that planet, the hidden knowledge. And so the Catholic Church also follow after Saturn, but through Pisces, the age of Pisces. And this is the age of sacrifice, which is Pisces. And so they follow this same symbols and images, wearing the Dagon hat, the fish. If you look at what the Pope wears and the bishops, they wear a fish hat, the age of Pisces. And so these are the structures. Jerusalem and the Roman Empire are one and the same. They come from the same era, and they sat around the table, the Council of Nicaea, to cut up all of the books and only keep 66. And the number of man is 6, and the 66 books, which is the number of a man, each one of us, which is 666. And so we have Jehovah, which is that being. And we'll get into that as we go further into Gnostic text, and you'll begin to see how this all connects. But let's go further into this paragraph and see what Philip is trying to tell us about these 3 structures for sacrifice. So it's in the blood that the gnosis can be released. Because when one dies, the blood is spilled, and then the spirit is released, and the soul is released. And that's what happens to the animal. The animal, when it's sacrificed, its light is released, and it goes back to the demiurge and the gods, and they feed on that light, for without it they could not survive. And it's like the movie Matrix. We're like batteries, right? And it's here to run this Konoma, this round. So it continues. One opened to the west and was called the holy place. Now this again is astrotheology, represents the four parts of the cross. And if you open up the black box and you have a total of 6 sides, then you get a cross, a black cross. The black box, open up the cube, and you have a cross. And so Christ is nailed to the cross. One hand to the west, feet to the south, and the other hand to the east. And this is why this is symbolic. This is why what Christ came to make the one and final sacrifice and to fulfill all the laws, the ceremonies, the rituals, the prophecy. And so he does this. It says, one opened to the west, one hand, was called the holy place. A second opened to the south, this is his feet, being nailed to the bottom of the cross, and was called the Holy of the Holy. And the third opened to the east, and that's the other hand, and was called the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could enter. And it's from the east side that the sun comes up, right? And this is why it's the Holy of Holies, and why everyone in Mecca prays to the east. And this is coming from ages and ages of paganism, of course, where people reverenced and worshiped the sun. And so Christ too fulfilled that, coming as the Son of God and going up into the clouds, ascending, like the sun ascending over the horizon. See, Christ came to fulfill all of the subconscious symbolisms and images that Philip talked about earlier, so that we may believe. This is what he said, I do this so that you may believe. And so here it says, baptism entails resurrection and redemption is in the bridal chamber. So what does this mean? It says baptism is resurrection and redemption. Remember earlier we talked about there's 2 different types of baptism. There's the baptism by water and baptism by fire or light. And in this case, the resurrection is the light. It's the sending of the light, the sun going up in the sky. And the redemption is the going down, which is the water flowing downward. And that's the redemption, the cleansing, the purifying. And redemption is in the bridal chamber. Redemption is when you marry the Christ and the Sophia. When you bring the wisdom and the knowledge together, you become whole. And this is the consummation. The bridal chamber is within a realm superior to what we belong to. That's the realm of the pleroma. And you cannot find anything like it. These are the ones who worship in spirit and in truth, for they do not worship in Jerusalem. So it's not found in some church. It's not found in a place on the Wailing Wall of Jerusalem or the temple in Jerusalem. And even today, you have Trump working with the nation of Israel and Netanyahu to proclaim Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, so that the eventual goal is to build the third temple, because that's the Jewish prophecy. Third temple must be built in order for the Messiah to arrive. Well, Christ has already come. He was the Messiah. But the Jewish people, mainly all the Jewish people, not all Jews, there are some Jews for Jesus, as they say, and the apostles were Jewish, but some people argue they were not really from the line of Judah, but they were from Benjaminites and so forth and so on. But it doesn't matter, because they also followed after the same religion in that time that all the other Israelites followed after. They were one group. So the point here is that the Jewish of today, just from the tribe of Judah, mainly what's called the Zionist movement, is looking to build the third temple, because they overlooked the Christ has already come. They're still waiting for him. They want to rule the planet. So this so-called one world government that you find in the Bible and Revelation is something that's preordained from thousands of years ago. And when the Israelites finally get the third temple, there'll be a great battle. It'll be a terrible war, and millions of people perhaps will die. And then they will establish the greater Israel in the Middle East, and they will then rule over the rest of humanity. And we'll talk about more of this as we go along in Gnostic text, but it's been revealed over 2,000 years ago in the Gnostic text what will transpire, and you're seeing that happen today. And this would transpire at the age of Aquarius, as we enter into the age of Aquarius. When the apostles asked Christ, when would the end times come? He said, only the Father in heaven knows. But he also gave them a clue. Follow in where the man holds the water jug, which is the symbol of Aquarius. And therein will be the pathway into the end times. That will be the beginning, the ending of the old and the beginning of the new. And so there are people in Jerusalem who do worship in Jerusalem, and they await the mysteries called the Holy of Holies, the curtain of which was torn. So even today they wait for the Messiah. He's the Holy of Holies. He's the risen Son among the pagans. He is the Christ that walked among the Jewish. He is the Christ that came to bring gnosis to the Gentiles. He's everything in all. And so he walked among the Indians, or India, and the Hindi, and the Buddhists. Some say he even walked among the Native Americans when he had gone into his mission. There's a period of time between Christ being 12 years old and 30 years old that's completely missing in the canonical text. And there are some that claim, through different archaeological findings and writings, that Christ walked throughout the planet among different tribes of people and spread his gospel. And also, he gained in his gnosis and knowledge, because he, after all, was a Jesus man that had the Christ in him. He was the first to awaken the gnosis within, and then to share that with all humanity. And so it says, our bridal chamber is the image of the bridal chamber above. That is why its curtain was torn from top to bottom, for some people from below had to go up. So the veil was torn. The secret chambers that held the Ark of the Covenant that only the holy men could go into, that veil was torn. It was no longer made accessible to a few small group of people who follow after Levitical law. This is what Philip is telling you. The veil was torn, and that Holy of Holies was no longer the Holy of Holies, but rather Christ had embodied everything and emanated it to all. In other words, he made it known that everybody has the Holy of Holies within. It's not found in some physical church or temple, but it's found within. And so the bridal chamber is the bridal chamber that we married with, no longer in the church with the physical partner, but now with the Christ and Sophia and the Mother Father in the pleroma. That becomes our new marriage. That is why the curtain was torn, so that from top to bottom, some people from below had to go up. That is why some people actually were able to ascend in that day to the pleroma. And then we're going to continue a couple more sections here. Wearing the light. The powers cannot see those who have put on the perfect light. They cannot seize them. One puts on the light in the mystery of union. This is when you come to understand you cannot take on the light by asking for forgiveness of your sins and you're a wretched beast and go to your priest and hide behind some little curtain, or give tithing on Sunday and then go out and do whatever you want the other 6 days of the week, and that's it. And then point your finger at everyone else and say how they're all going to hell in a handbasket because of the way they're living their life, but you, on the other hand, you're saved. It's not how it works. Wearing the light marries with the Christ, meaning you take on the chrism, which is the recognition that you are the Christ. Remember what Philip had said earlier when he talked about, under the section Truth and Nakedness, he says the person is no longer a Christian but is Christ. Apostles called this power the right and the left. That's Sophia and the Christ. When those two are integrated and you take on those, you are taking on fullness. That spiritual self within you is what will save you. And not save you from yourself, but save you from this realm. Because this crude matter, this flesh that you carry, that has no consequence to God the Father and Mother. Never did, never will. So what you do here today in this realm matters in so much as there's karma. In other words, you reap what you sow. That will see itself through. But ultimately, your spirit, what you do here, are not connected. The spiritual self is not limited. It is free from this realm. And only you need to decide when you're going to detach yourself. When you finally detach from the attachments and cares of this world and you decide to go back to the pleroma, then all of your karma is redeemed. That's what redemption is. And that's the moment where the light is unified, when one puts on the light in the mystery of union. Philip continues in that same thought, union and the bridal chamber. If the female had not separated from the male, the female and the male would not have died. So again, this is spiritual male and female. When we were separated, when we came to this pleroma, we lost our consort. We lost either a male or female counterpart. We lost that male part of ourselves or that female part of ourselves. It's hard to imagine this, but in this realm you're split, and your soulmate, twin flame, whatever is out there. In the pleroma, you two become integrated as one body. Now, you are separate entities, but you're also one body. And also, too, your one body is part of the whole, which is also one body. In other words, there is no division in purpose and meaning and what you're doing. It's all for the essence of the emanation and the pleroma. And there is no division or desire for division. And this is what Philip's talking about. When we come to this realm, we identify with either the male or the female, but ultimately we're actually both. And this is spiritually female and male. Spiritually being male and female means being able to embrace our wholeness and our fullness and our goodness and our perfection, just as we were intended to be from the beginning. When you start to doubt your worthiness to receive this good news is when you start to fracture up yourself, because you are basically eroding your self-esteem. And by doing that, either your female part or your male part suffers, or both. You must accept who you are as God intended you to be from the beginning. Now, that's not to say that who you are doesn't matter when it comes to how you project yourself to the outer world, because what you do also impacts other people's fullness. So this is why there is Logos that governs the universe, and to bring back everything that you do back to you. And so the separation of male and female was the beginning of death. Christ came to heal the separation that was from the beginning and reunite the two in order to give life to those who died through separation and unite them. Now the best thing we can do here on planet Earth, in the Matrix, in the Kenoma, is bring women up to the level of men, no greater, no less, equal to, eye to eye. And when we do that, that's when we begin to dissolve differences, and we begin to dissolve division, which is of the devil, and evening up of the left and the right, and we begin to heal, and there's no longer evil, you see, because then we'll have a perfect unison working together, and the world begins to transform and heal. And that means not just one's genitalia, like male and female genitalia, one's sex, but also every amalgamation and admixture of these two along the continuum, whether that be men who are more likely to carry feminine traits, or women who are more likely to carry masculine traits, whether that be hermaphrodite, so forth and so on. In the eyes of God, those were created as intended from the beginning, and anyone that is attempting to cause the person to have self-hate for that reason is of the devil, or as they are a divider, trying to separate the wholeness of that individual as created from the beginning, as intended by the mother father from the beginning. And so a woman is united with her husband in the bridal chamber, and those united in the bridal chamber will not be separated again. And this is hearkening to Matthew, when the Pharisees asked Christ about should a man and a woman be allowed to divorce. And Christ had said, "Let no man put asunder what God has brought together." In other words, this isn't about God saying, let there be no actual physical divorce on earth, because he led that up with saying that because you harden your heart, Moses and so forth allowed divorce. And Christ is saying that people divorce because they harden their heart toward each other. He's not making a statement that there should or shouldn't be divorce. He's saying that he's talking on a different level, because they ask him, is there marriage in heaven? He says, there's no marriage, not the way you think of marriage. So if there's no marriage in heaven in the way we think of it, there can't be divorce either, because there's no marriage. So he's not responding back to the Pharisees in the way almost all the proto-Orthodox Christians believe, and that's talking to us the way things are in this realm. Like he's saying, well, don't divorce because God brought you together. Let no man put those asunder. And some people even use that against gay people and make a claim that, see, that proves men and women are supposed to come together. This isn't what Christ is talking about at all, or was talking about at all. And Philip certainly is not talking about this here. What Christ was referring to is everybody is made up of male and female. So do not sever that. Do not put asunder. In other words, he's saying ultimately, when a man and a woman come together in this realm, they are seeking out, trying to find their full selves between those two. But by so doing, they're marrying into the flesh realm. And they are just reinforcing the separation of the male and the female, because they're recognizing in each other the male and the female only. They're not looking at the fullness of each other. And this is what causes them to ultimately harden their hearts to one another and leads to divorce. That's what Christ is saying. He's saying if the male can find the feminine part of himself and respect that, and also the female find the masculine part of herself and embrace that, these two will not be able to harden themselves to each other, for they will be able to appreciate each other and understand each other in ways that are difficult to fully grasp in today's world, and it appears even in that time. So this is what Christ was saying. But in the realm to come, when you ascend, there is no longer a separation of male and female. We fully embrace our feminine and masculine selves, and we appreciate exactly the way God intended us. We are full. So he says, that is why Eve became separated from Adam, because she had not united with him in the bridal chamber. So she didn't appreciate or look at the feminine part of him, and he didn't see the masculine part of her, because the demiurge had taken all of the feminine aspect out of Adam, and Eve was left with no masculine part and Adam with no feminine part. And so this world clings to that and fights for it. If you're a man, you're supposed to behave this way. You're not supposed to have emotions. You're supposed to go to war. You're supposed to fight. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to have muscles, so forth and so on. If you're a woman, you're supposed to cry. You're supposed to submit to your husband, so forth and so on. This is not the way it was intended. In fact, in Genesis, it says that it was for this reason, when Eve was separated from Adam, it was for this reason that man leaves his family. So in other words, in the pleroma, there is a family, and we never leave it. We're all one. Everybody's brothers and sisters. There are no relatives. There are no competition between families, jealousy and envy and covetousness, because we all have one purpose, and that is the emanation of the Father and Mother's will, to carry that forth. And so here we see that that verse in Genesis is not something that's holy or good, but rather it's Adam realizing that at some point he's going to have to leave his family, and he's going to cling to his wife. You see, that's not a healthy state, to cling to your wife. And the reason Adam recognizes this, because he has the gnosis within, and he understands this, but clinging is mentally unhealthy. But this is what he ends up doing. And this is what all men end up doing with their wives. And all of the wives end up doing with their husband. They cling to each other because they're desperate for each other in this world of suffering and death. You see, the whole world's falling apart. And so it's like a little island that mirrors the bridal chamber. It's the closest we're going to get to the pleroma in the heavens, is to find our so-called soulmate. But when we go to the pleroma, we find our full selves, and we become a consort to another full self. And together, there is no separation, and there's full appreciation as we are. And so this is that section, union in the bridal chamber. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to pick up where we left off in the next video, talking about what it meant for Adam when Eve was taken from him, under the section Adam's soul. At that, we'll talk again soon. Bye.